Hello everyone, my name is Amanda and welcome back to another video of the Planting Menu. Alright, so today Hoyas of the Moment video, I want to feature someone like a Hoya that is, in my opinion, underrated, in the Hoyas community. And the reason that I say it's underrated because I feel like, this is a fairly easy to access Hoya. Like, it's not too hard to get your hands on one, in my location at least. So I know if it is easy to get a Hoya, it's really based on like where you locate at. So at least in California, in the United States, this Hoya is not too hard to come by, and the price is actually fairly reasonable in comparison to some other Hoyas, right? And more importantly, this is a pretty low maintenance Hoya, at least in my environment and in my experience. So it's pretty easy to care for, and most importantly, it's actually bloom pretty easily. So I think it's a great Hoya for beginners and also for people who are trying to just like, get your Hoya to flower, because we know it is not always the easiest thing to get your Hoyas to flower. So with that being said, can you guess what Hoya I'm gonna talk about? Okay, so have you made your guess? So today, underrated Hoya that I'm talking about is, ta-da, Hoya multiflora. So yeah, this is my Hoya multiflora. As you can see, it's, growing pretty nicely. I would say since I got it, it probably grown like, 2/3 in size, which is, pretty marvelous. And yeah, Hoya multiflora actually has been around for a long time. The first time it was published was in catalogs in 1823 by someone named Carl Bloom. And yeah, it was a long time ago. And actually, Hoya's multiflora wasn't called Hoya multiflora before. In fact, its name has been changed 27 times, at least from what I can find. Because if you look up the International Plant Name Index, you can find the synonyms of Hoya multiflora. And Hoya multiflora actually was not even in the genus of Hoya. It was in something else, back in the 1823 era. And later on, it was put in the Hoya's genus. And even within the genus genera that, Hoya multiflora was put in, it had multiple names. So yeah, so it's definitely is a more a species that have been around for like a long time. So yeah, so Hoya multiflora. So multiflora in Latin, it just means like, many flowers. As you can see, it has many flowers. And this is also called shooting star Hoyas. I think it's also because of the flowers. So Hoya multiflora is native in basically tropical Asia, like China. You can find it in China, you can find it in Borneo, you can find it in Southwest Asia, those places. So it have a pretty good distribution range. And as you can see, Hoya multiflora have a thinner leaf texture. So I wouldn't say it's like super thin, but it's like in comparison to the more like succulent species like Hoya canosa, for example, Hoya multiflora definitely have a slightly thinner leaves. And as you can see, Hoya multiflora also have a more bush-like growing structure. So by that I mean like, in comparison to the Hoyas that tendril, like they shoot out the tendril and like, grow on trees and bark, the more epiphytic species of Hoya. Hoya multiflora is actually more like a terrestrial species of Hoya, which means that they grow more in like soil from the ground up. So yeah, so that's another interesting thing about Hoya multiflora, and the reason I mentioned it is because it's actually related to how we actually want to take care of this particular Hoya species, which I'm gonna go over in a little bit. And since it's obviously flowering, so let's look at the flower too. So yeah, so again, it's called shooting star Hoya because of the shape of the flower. I would say in comparison to some other Hoyas, like the shape is actually more unique, right? You can see like the petals is kind of like shooting backward, and then you can see the corona which is the center of the flowers. It's like slightly red and it's white, and then it's have some yellow at the back. So yeah, so this is the Hoya multiflora blooms. Interestingly, I got a couple questions on Facebook, or like I ran into multiple posts on Facebook, and people mentioned that, yeah, like how long, like my Hoya multiflora is like budding up, so you can see like these are the buds, you know, that is first started to develop, and then it will eventually look like this, develop into something like this, right? So when it is at this stage, this particular stage, right, you know, like a little bit more like mature bud stage, people ask, oh, so yeah, my Hoya multiflora is like budding up like so, right? How long does it take to bloom? Does it take really long? Surprisingly, it does take a little bit longer than most of my other Hoyas, interestingly, with the exception of Lockyer. Lockyer also take really long. So yeah, for whatever reason, so for example, my tomentoensis, like, or like my Croniana actually, would, once the bud it's like, take shape or mature, it may take like less than a week for it to open up. But for multiflora, even when the bud is like all like good, like, ready to like open, it's still gonna take like a few weeks for whatever reason for it to open up. So I think that just, the plant itself. So to answer your question, in my experience, if you're curious, yes, for me too, it does take a little bit for the buds to actually open up and become flowers like this. And also the flower doesn't, at least in my experience, the flower doesn't smell like anything. So yeah, so this is Hoya multiflora. Yeah, it's very robust. I love this plant a lot. All right, so let's talk about cares. So for light wise, this is like the biggest plus for Hoya multiflora in my opinion. If you just started to grow Hoyas, or if you don't have a lot of light, because this guy doesn't require as much bright lights as some other more succulent Hoyas. Again, like Hoya canosa, right? Or Hoya Ubufada, or Hoya, even the Crimson Queen or Crimson Princess. Like, this guy just doesn't require as much light, and I think it's highly, due to its like a little bit like thinner leaf texture, right? So yeah, so I put it at a really under like a weaker grow light in comparison to many of my other Hoyas, and it's, it does amazingly, and you can see like, the leaf actually come out pretty dark green. And I think if you give it too much bright light, it's actually will bleach the leaf into a lime green color. So yeah, so I think actually this is a big plus, because you don't like have to worry about, oh, I don't have enough light, for this particular Hoyas. Yeah, Hoya multiflora actually doesn't require too much light to, be able to like grow and even bloom. So for watering wise, this is important. Because remember I mentioned, like, when I was talking about the growth structure of this plant, right? It is a more bush-like structure. And the leaf is, again, a thinner. So actually this can tolerate a little bit more water than most other Hoyas. I think I mentioned that in some of my other videos, that there's one video that I actually talk about like moisture tolerance, like a higher moisture tolerance Hoyas. And Hoya multiflora actually is one of them. Most of my Hoyas, are in bulk mix because I want the water to drink really quick. However, this Hoya multiflora, as you can see, I want to try to show you, it still is an original Hoya mix that I first got from the grower. And it's a PDM mix. As you can see, it's like more like dense. And Hoya multiflora like does perfectly fine. And of course, I always use the moisture meter, or I will always check the soil before I water. But I would say, like, even with this like PDM medium, I water once every 7 to 10 days, just like my other succulent Hoyas. So yeah, so I do think that Hoya multiflora can tolerate a little bit more moisture, just because of its like thinner leaf texture, and it's like, more like a bush-like, like a tree-like growing structure. And as I mentioned, for medium wise, I keep the original mix because it doesn't seem to have any problem with it. And yeah, I don't see a point of reporting it if the plant is doing just fine. Like I said many other times, like if my plant is doing fine, like it doesn't matter Hoyas or whatever plant, if it's doing fine in its location, is in its mediums, like everything is fine, I'm not touching it. Like I'm not like, you know, going in there and just fix a problem that doesn't exist, right? So that's basically just my approach. But of course, I'm sure that if you put it in a more bulky medium, then you may have to just, you know, make sure that it doesn't dry out too quickly. Humidity wise, I would say, yeah, you know, because of the thinner leaf texture, it definitely would love to have more humidity. However, it doesn't need it. So again, my ambient humidity is 50 to 60% in my house, just because I'm literally like 2 blocks away from the beach. So I have a pretty, I got lucky, I have a pretty good ambient humidity, but I would say like 50% is pretty much what, you know, most Hoyas, including multiflora, would like. And if you give it a little bit higher humidity, like 70%, would it be happy? I'm sure it would, but I don't see that as like okay, you must have that humidity for, you know, this particular species to grow. So yeah, so that's for the humidity wise. And I touch on wood, do not have you know, any pest pressure on Hoya multiflora. The only thing that I can see happen is like mealybugs, but again, I use systemic pest control, so I use it like once every 8 to 10 weeks according to bottle instructions as a preventive measure for any pest. So yeah, so you know, so far I don't have, again, knock on wood, any pest pressure on Hoya multiflora. So yeah, that's how I care for it. And I highly recommend this plant for anyone who is, for anyone, but especially for those of you who just started to collect Hoyas, because as I mentioned, it's somewhat easy to access. It's pretty low maintenance in terms of all the different factors like light, water, etc, etc, and most importantly, it's pretty easy to bloom. So I know blooming Hoya is not like the easiest thing to do, especially if you're living indoor. And Hoya multiflora, it's just that kind of Hoya that would allow you to do that easier than most other Hoyas. So that would help you to just gain the experience and really like build up that confidence of blooming a Hoyas. So yeah, highly recommend. If you don't have a Hoya multiflora, go get a Hoya multiflora. Yay. Alright, so that's all I have got for you today. Today we talk about one of my favorites. I know I said it for all my Hoyas, but if I feature it on Hoyas of the moment, I pretty much like it a lot. Hoya multiflora, you know, pretty easy to access, you know, easy to care for, easy to bloom. Like, I cannot think of a single reason that, you know, you shouldn't have a multiflora, Hoya multiflora. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you click like. If you want more future video, make sure you click subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.